Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Day one of Prime Minister Modi's third term, and he packed in a lot. He allocated portfolios to the ministers who took oath yesterday. We'll tell you who got what. Also had a message for his team and made an outreach to the leaders from the neighborhood who were in New Delhi for his oath-taking ceremony. We'll get you an interview with the Prime Minister of Bhutan. Meanwhile, in Europe, Giorgia Meloni has emerged as the big winner of the European election. The leaders of France and Germany have lost. Emmanuel Macron has dissolved the French parliament and ordered a snap election. The Belgian Prime Minister has resigned. We'll bring you the results of the EU election and decode the continent's shift to the right. In Israel, a setback for Netanyahu. Benny Gantz has quit the war cabinet. What does it mean for the Israeli Prime Minister? We'll tell you that. In Pakistan, it's the government versus the IMF on raising taxes. Can Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif survive this one? 9 pilgrims killed in a terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir. We'll bring you the details. In Africa, tensions between Benin and Niger escalate over the arrest of 5 oil workers. In cricket, India beat Pakistan in a nail-biter in New York, and in Japan, the government is launching a dating app. It is getting mixed reactions. We'll tell you all about it. The headlines first. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in West Asia to push for a Gaza ceasefire plan. This is Blinken's 8th visit to the region since war broke out in October. The top U.S. diplomat held talks with the Egyptian president in Cairo. He is now in Israel. Blinken is in Israel, where he will meet Prime Minister Netanyahu. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif finally congratulates Prime Minister Modi of India. It comes almost a week after Prime Minister Modi won a historic third term in office. The Indian Prime Minister has thanked his Pakistani counterpart for the good wishes. Several global leaders attended Prime Minister Modi's swearing-in ceremony yesterday, but no invitation was sent to either China or Pakistan. Fighting in the Sudan shuts down the last hospital in Darfur city. It was closed after an attack by the paramilitary forces. The armed group opened fire on medical staff and patients as it looted the site. The war in the Sudan has killed thousands of people. Nearly 9 million people have also been displaced. Hundreds of protesters rally outside Armenia's parliament. They want the Prime Minister to be impeached. Recently, Armenia handed over territory to neighboring Azerbaijan to settle a decades-old dispute. The move has angered many in Yerevan, leading to mass protests. And 3 Valencia fans get 8 months in jail. The punishment is for racially abusing Real Madrid star Vinicius Jr. The incident happened at a La Liga match last year. The fans have also been slapped with a 2-year match ban. And they're off. It was the first day of Prime Minister Modi's third term in office. He showed no signs of slowing down, and his coalition is already facing a stress test. Let's recap the day's events for you, starting with the latest. That is portfolio allocation. Who gets which ministry? That list was released this evening. No change in the big 4. Home Ministry for Amit Shah, Finance for Nirmala Sitharaman, Defence for Rajnath Singh and External Affairs for S. Jaishankar. They've all retained their portfolios. Same with Nitin Gadkari. He keeps his Ministry of Highways, and Piyush Goyal, who will continue in the role of the Minister of Commerce. Former diplomat Hardeep Singh Puri has retained the Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministry. Dharmendra Pradhan gets the Education Ministry of India. Ashwini Vaishnav is now in charge of 3 portfolios: Railways, which he had in the past as well, Information and Broadcasting, and Information Technology. Jyotiraditya Scindia has been moved from civil aviation to telecom. Kiren Rijiju has been elevated. Earlier, he was the Minister of Food Processing. Now he will handle parliamentary affairs. Mansukh Mandavia has been moved as well. Earlier, he was the Health Minister. Now he is in charge of two portfolios, Labour and Sports. The current BJP President, JP Nadda, will now handle the Ministry of Health. He was Health Minister in the first Modi government as well. So you could say the Prime Minister has kept his core team intact, and the message here is quite clear. Policy continuity. Modi believes that his team has delivered on their targets, and most of those ministers will continue in their old roles. The changes seem to have more to do with the accommodation of allies. Let's tell you about that as well. What have the allies got? 5 NDA allies have been given cabinet berths. H.D. Kumaraswamy from the JDS. He is the new Minister for Heavy Industry and Steel. Jitan Ram Manjhi of the Hindustan Awami Morcha. And a key face from Bihar is the new Minister for Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. Rajiv Singh from the JDU, the Janata Dal United, better known as Lalan Singh, has got two portfolios, Fisheries and Panchayati Raj. Then we have Ram Mohan Naidu from the Telugu Desam Party. He is the new Minister for Civil Aviation. And finally, Chirag Paswan from the Lok Janashakti Party. He is the new Minister of Food Processing. Tomorrow, all these leaders will take charge of their ministries. The Prime Minister got some more work done on day one. He released the 17th installment of the Farmer Support Scheme. It's called the Kisan Samman Nidhi, or the Farmers Tribute Fund. It provides financial assistance to a large section of farmers in India. They get 2,000 rupees for every 4 months. 2,000 rupees every 4 months, so that's 6,000 rupees in a year. And that's around $70. Today's release of funds will benefit some 93 million people. In all, they'll receive around $2.3 billion. So that was Prime Minister Modi's first official act in his third term. Later in the day, he addressed his staff, and this is what he had to say.
दोस्तों 10 साल पहले हमारे देश में एक छवि बनी हुई थी कि पीएमओ एक शक्ति का केंद्र है, एक बहुत बड़ा पावर सेंटर है, और मैं न सत्ता के लिए पैदा हुआ हूं, न मैं शक्ति अर्जित करने के लिए सोचता हूं। ये पीपल्स पीएमओ होना चाहिए, ये मोदी पीएमओ नहीं हो सकता है।
People's PMO, not Modi's PMO. That was the message for the Prime Minister's political opponents as well. He said that his office is chasing one goal, the goal of a developed India by 2047. And to achieve this goal, he has appointed a diverse set of cabinet colleagues. We have a few more interesting facts about the new Council of Ministers. For starters, it is quite large in size. Including the Prime Minister, there are 72 ministers. The maximum strength can be 81 ministers. They already have 72, so there is limited scope for expansion. Let's break this down further. 65 ministers are men, just 7 are women. Only 7 out of 72. The BJP has kept the lion's share of the seats. 61 ministers are from the BJP. The remaining 11 are NDA allies. A total of 9 parties have been accommodated. The two main allies, the Telugu Desam Party and the Janata Dal United, have got 2 berths each, 1 cabinet and 1 minister of state. 3 more parties have got cabinet berths. The Janata Dal Secular, JDS from Karnataka, the Hindustan Awam Morcha and the Lok Janashakti Party from Bihar. The 4 remaining allies have been accommodated in junior posts. 57 ministers are newly elected MPs from the lower house, that's the Lok Sabha. 13 ministers are members of the Rajya Sabha, or the upper house. 2 ministers, Ravneet Singh Bittu and George Kurian, are not members of parliament, so they'll have to get a seat in parliament within 6 months, most likely through the Rajya Sabha. That's how they'll be brought in. And how different is this team from the last one? 38 ministers have been dropped, including names like Smriti Irani, Anurag Thakur, Rajiv Chandrasekhar and Meenakshi Lekhi. 34 ministers from the previous council have been retained. This is also a cabinet of multimillionaires. 35 ministers have assets worth 10 crore rupees and above. That's more than $1 million. 34 ministers have assets worth 1 crore rupees and above. That's more than $100,000. The richest minister is from the TDP. His name is Dr. Chandrasekhar Pemasani. His total declared assets are well over 5,000 crores. That's over $500 million. So that's the NDA cabinet for you. But there is some bitterness among allies. Like the NCP or the Nationalist Congress Party, it is led by Ajit Pawar. They have just one MP, that's Praful Patel. Now, Praful Patel has served as a cabinet minister in the past. During the Congress-led UPA government, he was a cabinet minister. This time, he was offered the role of a junior minister. Patel says that he's declined the offer, since this would have been a demotion for him. He says he has received assurances from the BJP, and that is the challenge of coalition politics, really. On paper, the NCP has just one seat. The BJP has to accommodate other NDA partners. Parties with far more seats than the NCP, they have to be accommodated. But ignoring such allies, the smaller ones, may also have repercussions for the BJP's alliances at the state level. And that is the balancing act that the BJP will have to do for the next 5 years. Yesterday's ceremony was significant for one more reason: the presence of leaders from the neighborhood. 7 of them were invited. We had the presidents of Sri Lanka and the Maldives, the prime ministers of Bangladesh, Mauritius, Nepal and Bhutan, and the vice president of the Seychelles. They were all invited for the oath-taking. Their presence also opened up an opportunity to advance India's diplomatic interests, and the Prime Minister made the most of it. There was a dinner last night at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Prime Minister Modi met all foreign dignitaries there. He engaged with every leader one-on-one, and the seating arrangement at the dinner table was worth noting. Look who was seated next to the Indian Prime Minister. That's Mohammad Muizzu, the President of the Maldives, someone who not very long ago labelled India a bully and won the election on the platform of India out. Muizzu was seen speaking with Prime Minister Modi throughout the evening. Imagine being a fly on the wall and listening to this conversation. Is a reset on the cards? Will Muizzu tone down his anti-India rhetoric? Honestly, we neither have the details of the conversation nor the answers to these questions. But after the dinner, a statement was released. It came from the Ministry of External Affairs. It said the Prime Minister had thanked the leaders for attending the oath-taking ceremony. He also reiterated his commitment to India's neighbourhood first policy and the Sagar vision, that's short for security and growth for all in the region, SAGAR. Now, these are 2 important pillars of India's neighbourhood engagement. It is also a sign that the neighbourhood will remain a key focus area in Modi's 3rd term. The neighbours certainly expect more. Earlier today, we sat down with Tshering Tobgay. He is the Prime Minister of Bhutan, and he lauded Prime Minister Modi's commitment to work with his neighbours. What are your expectations from Narendra Modi in his 3rd term as India's Prime Minister?
My expectations? Well, looking at the track record, you can, I think, confidently say that 3.0, Modi 3.0 is going to be bigger and better.
When Prime Minister Modi took over in his first term in 2014, Bhutan was the first country that he visited. And as he wrapped up his 2nd term, Bhutan was the last country that he visited, and that too in the middle of the election season. And that shows New Delhi's commitment to this relationship. How much of a difference does this sort of a personal outreach and touch make to equations between 2 countries?
It's important, but what's more important is to understand and to acknowledge why Bhutan, why the neighborhood. India is assuming its rightful place as a world leader. Yet Prime Minister Modi has repeatedly shown that the neighborhood matters, and that as far as Bhutan is concerned, Bhutan matters very much.
So this morning, S. Jaishankar hit the ground running. He's back as India's External Affairs Minister. As we just told you, he met all the leaders from the region today. No significant announcements were made. I guess the message is in the outreach itself, the presence of neighbours for this ceremony. It also shows their commitment towards their relationship with India. New Delhi has every incentive, every reason to reciprocate, and that means creating more synergies and interdependence. The Bhutanese Prime Minister had some suggestions on that front as well. There is a perception that India is drifting away from its neighbours. Do you share that perception, or do you think it's exaggerated?
Yes and no. If there is a perception that India is, you said, growing away, possibly economically. Economically, India has grown very quickly. By now, it should have been a $3 billion a $5 trillion economy had it not been for COVID. Had it not been for COVID, India would be the third largest economy in the world already, a $5 trillion economy. But it's going to get to $5 trillion really soon, and then you are well on your way to a $30 trillion economy. The question is, what about the neighbors? Are we going to progress with India? And that's the second part of the question. India has always been mindful of its neighbors. Prime Minister Modi has made absolutely has said his focus is on the neighborhood first policy. And this is why during his swearing in 2014, the neighborhood was here. 2019, the neighborhood was here. Yesterday, 2024, the neighborhood is here, and I can see this continuing. But it's not just during the swearing in. I mean, India hosts the BRICS summit and invites the neighborhood. I was here. India hosts G20, invites the neighborhood. So it's very, very clear, and it's very established time and time again that for the Indian government, and in particular Prime Minister Modi, the neighborhood matters, and matters a great deal.
So the neighbours want deeper economic integration with India, and some possibilities are already opening up. For instance, yesterday Bhutan and Bangladesh held a bilateral meeting, and this meeting happened before the oath-taking ceremony. They discussed a proposal for a hydropower project. Bangladesh wants to import hydropower from Bhutan, but geography and borders are posing a challenge. There is no direct way for Bangladesh to get electricity from Bhutan. For this agreement to materialize, for it to work, they need India. They're working on a tripartite transit agreement with India. So economic integration will be a key priority. The obvious challenge would be China. The new government will have to confront the old China problem. Their rapidly expanding presence, China's growing investments and increasing patrols in the Indian Ocean region. They're sending what they call research ships, but these are believed to be spy vessels. Earlier, there used to be 3 such visits in a year, but now there are 12 to 15 ships in a year. So India will have to have a strategy to counter all of this. Then, of course, we have Pakistan. In Modi's first term, Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was also invited for the swearing in. But since then, Islamabad has been dropped from New Delhi's guest list. The relationship is frozen, and a thaw is unlikely anytime soon. And these are the realities that India must work with. It's going to need all the help it can get from its neighbours to advance its interests in the region and beyond. Not just India, Europe also had elections this week, and I must say equally riveting. Like countries, the European Union also has a parliament, and this parliament, the EU Parliament, has 720 members in all. They're elected for 5 years. So who won this time? Well, it's not really a question of who won, it's more about who made gains. And the answer is the European far right. There are broadly 2 ideologies in Europe's parliament. One is pro-EU, the other is anti-EU, or Eurosceptics as they're called. Now, the far right belongs to the second group. They are Eurosceptics. These are nationalist parties across the continent, and some of their policies are common, like less control from the European Union, less support for Ukraine, less investment in climate change, and a crackdown on migration. Broadly, this was their campaign plank, and it has found takers. Look at the projected results of the EU Parliament. The ECR is winning 73 seats. That's the European Conservatives and Reformists, ECR. It's a bloc led by Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister. They had won 69 seats in the last election. This time they're at 73. So Meloni is the star of this election. She may not have won a majority, but she's clearly the kingmaker. Another conservative bloc is Identity and Democracy. They had 49 seats in the last election. This time they have 58. So the Eurosceptics are now a powerful group in parliament, which brings us to the other side, the pro-Europe parties. The Green Party has lost 20 seats. Emmanuel Macron's party has lost 20 seats. Meanwhile, the left and socialists remain unchanged. Also the same result, almost the same result as the last time for the left and the socialists. So who is forming the government? It's the centrists again. The biggest group in the EU Parliament is the EPP, the European People's Party. It is led by Ursula von der Leyen. It's a pro-European party, so it looks like she will stay on as the EU president. So let's recap now. The far right has made major gains, von der Leyen has held on, and the left has also held on. So who has lost? Who is the big loser? Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz, the leaders of France and Germany. Both their parties did pretty badly. Macron's Renew party was beaten in France. So guess what? He's calling for snap elections.
After having proceeded with the consultations as provided in the Article 12 of our Constitution, I decided to give back to you the choice for the future of our Parliament with a vote. And so, I am dissolving tonight our National Assembly. At the end of this day, I cannot pretend as if nothing happened. To add to this situation is a fever that has reached public and parliamentary debate in recent years in our country, a disorder that, I know, worries you, sometimes shocks you, and to which I do not plan to give in.
It's a huge political gamble. He's dissolved the parliament. This is a snap election, so there are no opinion polls. For all we know, Macron's party could lose. The Eurosceptics may get a majority in the French parliament. And what happens then? Macron will be forced to pick a prime minister from the right wing, which means deadlock. Macron will still control France's foreign policy. He will remain the president, but he won't control domestic policy. In other words, he could be a lame duck president. Same for Germany. Chancellor Olaf Scholz, his party polled 14% of the vote. The centre-right Christian Democrats got 30% and the far-right got 16%. They beat Olaf Scholz's party. Naturally, questions are being asked. Scholz himself led the campaign in Germany, yet his party was routed. So will his coalition continue to remain in power? Or could Germany go the French way? That is the big question at this point. In Belgium, the Prime Minister has already resigned, a liberal leader called Alexander De Croo. His coalition was routed in the European election. The right and far right made significant gains, so De Croo is stepping aside. All of this is very significant for Europe. France and Germany have been the natural leaders of the European Union, yet both governments were rejected. So Macron and Scholz are on shaky ground. At the same time, Giorgia Meloni is making huge strides. She's establishing herself as a prominent figure in Brussels, maybe even a natural leader.
I take it as the message of those who want to say keep going and do it if possible with greater determination, a signal that I understand, a signal that I am ready to welcome, and I am proud that this nation presents itself at the G7 in Europe with the strongest government of all. This is something that has not happened in the past, that is happening today. It is a satisfaction and also a great responsibility.
Where does this leave the EU president? In all likelihood, she will retain her position. But the question is, who will she work with? Will she reach out to work with the Eurosceptics, or will she stick to liberal allies? Well, Ursula von der Leyen has made her position clear. Pro-Europe is the way to go, she says.
We may differ on individual points, but we all have an interest in stability, and we all want a strong and effective Europe. So throughout my campaign, I've been working hard to build a broad and effective majority of pro-European forces.
It's easier said than done. The far right has a lot of political power now. Expect them to play a key role in policy making in Europe. So that was how the EU voted. But what should we make of this result? Why did the Eurosceptics make gains? What does it really mean when you hear the phrase, Europe has taken a shift to the far right? What does it mean? Well, first things first, the Eurosceptic parties did make gains, but centrist parties seem to have held on to power. Like we just told you, the centrists are the ones who control the EU Parliament right now. They're the group backing the current European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. She might become the European Commission President again. She's still the leading candidate, but getting the presidency will be harder this time.
Is holding. But it is also true that the extremes on the left and on the right have gained support. And this is why the result comes with great responsibility for the parties in the centre.
Von der Leyen says the centre is holding, but the extremes have gained support. She's worried about the rise of the Eurosceptics, parties who are primarily concerned about their own countries. These are the far-right parties that have made gains. Why are more Europeans putting their faith in the Eurosceptic parties now? Because of all the troubles that they faced in the last few years. Let's take the war in Ukraine, for example. It led to a cost of living crisis across the world. Europe was particularly affected, especially when the supply of cheap gas from Russia ended. And this caused inflation to surge and brought the European economy to its knees. People in these countries needed help from their governments, but what did they see? Their elected leaders were spending billions to arm Ukraine while they suffered. The European leaders said propping up Ukraine was for the greater good, that it would be a shield against Russian expansion. But that argument does not make someone's hunger go away. The Eurosceptics offered a different approach. Take care of the locals first, they said. Ukraine's problem was not their problem. And it seems that this approach found more takers. That isn't the only reason for the rise of the right, though. There's also the issue of migration. Migrants have been making their way to Europe for years now. Some are genuine asylum seekers, but others are driven by economic considerations. And this has angered some Europeans, especially those who are struggling economically. They feel that the migrants will take away their jobs and make an already difficult situation worse. The Eurosceptic parties have capitalized on this. They all promised to reduce immigration by tougher border checks. They promised to deport illegal immigrants. And this has appealed to many in Europe, leading to more votes for the Eurosceptics.
There are problems, such as high prices and illegal migration, which haven't been addressed by the political system that has been governing during the last decades. That's why people turn to the right.
There's also another reason why the Eurosceptics won votes. Their disregard for the environment. And you heard that correctly, their disregard. Because over the past few years, European farmers have been suffering due to green regulation. Europe has been looking to address climate change, and for that, it wanted to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Agriculture leads to a lot of emissions. So the EU has been putting pressure on farmers to go green by reducing their subsidies. This led to farmer protests across Europe earlier this year. Tractors were seen in every major European capital. The farmers felt suffocated by the green regulation, which they blamed on the green parties that campaigned on an environmental plank. The Eurosceptics took advantage of this anger. They promised to do away with the excessive green regulation. This may hurt the world in the long run, but it would provide relief to the European farmers. And this strategy also worked in the favor of the Eurosceptic parties, at the expense of the Greens.
I find it disappointing that the Greens performed so poorly. They are the only party that actually does something sensible, but they are being boycotted and sabotaged over and over again by citizens because everyone wants to protect the environment, but nobody at his expense.
Economics, migration, and green regulations. This trifecta dealt a blow to the centrists. And it gave the Eurosceptics a big boost. If things do not change, the far right may just win the next elections outright. This weekend was a good one for Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel had rescued 4 hostages. The mood was positive. People were lauding the government, but this joy was short-lived for the Israeli Prime Minister because on Sunday, he received the first political blow of this war. Benny Gantz quit the war cabinet. He is a political rival of Benjamin Netanyahu. In October, he joined the emergency government, which was formed after the war. But the lack of a post-war plan in Gaza made him quit. So what does this exit mean for Netanyahu? His government won't collapse, but he's in deep trouble, completely at the mercy of his radical allies now. Can Netanyahu recover from this political setback, or will this lead to an election in Israel in the middle of a war? Our next report tells you.
Netanyahu is preventing us from advancing toward true victory, which is the justification for the ongoing and painful cost. That is why we are leaving the emergency government today, with a heavy heart but with full confidence.
With that, Benny Gantz is out. The Israeli war cabinet minister has resigned. He quit Israel's emergency government. Gantz is a political rival of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's also a former chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Forces. Until October last year, his party was in the opposition. But then came October 7th. Hamas attacked Israel. The country went to war, and Gantz agreed to form an emergency government with Netanyahu. So his National Unity Party decided to join the war cabinet. It currently holds 5 positions in it. But as the war stretched on, the differences emerged. Gantz asked the Prime Minister for clarity, and when he didn't get that, he set a deadline of June 8th. Gantz asked Netanyahu to lay out Israel's plan on how it would achieve its goals in Gaza, what the Strip will look like after the war. The Israeli Prime Minister dismissed these questions. He called them washed-up words. But looks like Gantz actually meant it. He has resigned. He's also called for elections. Netanyahu tried to pacify him. In a post on X, the Israeli Prime Minister said it wasn't a time to quit, but to join forces. But looks like they're way past that.
I believe that it's good that Gantz is leaving the government now. I believe that he's doing what he thinks is best for the country, and his intentions are right. And maybe this will bring to election soon.
I think using always the card of now it's not the time to be political is dangerous because it's been already 8 months of war.
Gantz's resignation will not bring down the government, however. His party was not part of Netanyahu's coalition that still retains a majority. So the emergency government is safe, but it will look very different. Gantz was a moderate voice in the war cabinet. With his departure, Netanyahu is now at the mercy of his right-wing allies more than ever. In fact, they're already asking for positions. Itamar Ben-Gvir has demanded a place in the war cabinet. He's Israel's far-right security minister. But that's not the only problem for Benjamin Netanyahu. For months, he's faced criticism over the war in Gaza. The latest Rafah offensive, the attack on schools and refugee camps. This weekend brought him some much-needed relief. Israel celebrated the rescue of 4 hostages. They have returned home after 8 months. But looks like Netanyahu's joy was short-lived. With Gantz's departure, he's back under the scanner. It comes amid deepening divisions in Israel. Citizens want all the hostages back. Allies want peace. And coalition members think Netanyahu is not doing enough. Right now, he's stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea. And if the Israeli Prime Minister doesn't change his strategy, it's likely that he will face more setbacks in the days to come, both at home and abroad.
From one government in trouble to another. This one is in Pakistan. Shehbaz Sharif took charge as Prime Minister in the month of March, but his government already looks shaky. He faces 2 major problems. One is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or as Pakistan calls it, credit card. The second is his coalition partner, the PPP, or the Pakistan People's Party. Apparently, the alliance is divided. Let's look at the IMF first. They're asking Pakistan's government to raise income tax, not for millionaires, not for the super rich, but for the middle class. Suppose your income is 100,000 Pakistani rupees per month, 1 lakh Pakistani rupees a month, which is around $350 US, then your current tax rate is 2.5%. But the IMF wants Pakistan to raise it. To how much? 7.5%. Again, suppose you earn 133,000 Pakistani rupees, which is $470 US, then your current tax rate is 12.5%. But the IMF says increase it to 20%. And that's not even the worst proposal. The IMF also wants a tax on agriculture and health. How much? A standard 18%. Now, this is very significant. Agriculture makes up 24% of Pakistan's GDP. It also employs 68% of the country's population. So agriculture is not just a sector, it's a lifeline for Pakistan's people and economy. But the International Monetary Fund says slap more taxes on it. The idea here is quite simple. Higher tax equals more revenue for the government. More revenue equals more fiscal stability. But guess who will suffer? Pakistan's middle and lower class. They are already burdened by 15% inflation. Now their government wants them to pay more taxes. How will they do it? Experts say they simply cannot. Only a 30% rise in income will make this tax viable. So can the government reject the IMF? Well, that's a big risk. Pakistan is asking for another bailout from the International Monetary Fund. It's worth between $6 and $8 billion. If Pakistan needs that loan, they must do what the IMF tells them to do. If not, no bailout. Talk about a tough spot for Shehbaz Sharif. If he can't get a bailout, his economy will suffer. If he raises taxes, he could face rebellion. Sharif is already an unpopular prime minister. The last thing he needs is public protests. Which brings us to his second challenge. Trouble from allies. The PPP has dropped many hints. One leader says Sharif could dissolve the parliament. That too within 3 months. Another leader is complaining about the budget. He says the PPP is not being consulted. What does all of this suggest? That the Pakistan People's Party is keeping its options open. After the elections, they offered support to the Sharifs, but they did not join the cabinet. Later reports hinted at a U-turn. Bilawal Bhutto was apparently keen on becoming foreign minister again, but nothing came of it. So the PPP strategy is quite clear. Keep a distance from the Sharifs. Make sure his bitter pills do not affect the PPP's popularity. The question is, will any of this work? We may find out on the 12th of June. That's when Pakistan will present its budget. Experts are hoping for a balance between bitter pills and welfare. It should answer many of the important questions. Like, will the IMF agree to another bailout? Will public anger pour onto the streets of Pakistan? And will investors put their faith in Pakistan again? We should have an answer later this week. Yesterday was a big day for India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi took oath of office for a historic third term. But during the swearing-in ceremony, news broke of a terrible terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Riyasi. Terrorists attacked a bus carrying pilgrims. They opened fire at the bus. The bus lost control and fell into a gorge. 9 people were killed, 30 others were injured. Pakistan-backed TRF, or the Resistance Force, has claimed responsibility for this attack. It is a terrorist group linked to the Lashkar-e-Toiba, and they've said that there will be more such attacks. Our next report tells you more.
The bus was on its way from Shiv Khori Cave Shrine. It's in Jammu and Kashmir's Riyasi district. It was headed to Katra, a town famous for the Vaishno Devi temple. The bus was passing through dense forests and hilly terrain. That's when the attack happened. Terrorists were apparently waiting for the bus. 2 of them opened fire. The gunfire hit the driver. He lost control of the vehicle, and the bus veered off the road and fell into a gorge.
बस हमारी जो है थोड़ी सी आगे जाकर खाई में पलट गई। 5-6 राउंड गिरने के बाद एक बड़ा पत्थर में जो है बस फंस गया और रुक गया। और सभी लोग जो है छोटी लोग हैं, उसमें कोई पड़ा था बेसुध, कोई इधर, कोई बाहर, कोई बस में, और सभी लोगों को एकदम जो है चोट लगा हुआ था। और फायर होता रहा, तब भी जो है 10-15 मिनट तक और फायर हुआ।
9 people were killed, 30 others were injured. All of them were pilgrims from Uttar Pradesh, Delhi and Rajasthan. Pakistan-backed the Resistance Front, or TRF, have claimed responsibility for the attack. It is an offshoot of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. The terror group was founded in 2019, and since then it has been behind multiple attacks. In 2023, India designated TRF a terrorist organization. TRF have warned of more such attacks on tourists and non-locals, calling the Riyasi attack only the beginning of a renewed start. The news of the attack broke as Narendra Modi took oath as Prime Minister for the third time. PM Modi has taken stock of the situation. He has asked for the best medical care to be provided to the injured. The rescue operations have concluded now, but the Indian Army has launched a search operation. Police have launched a manhunt to track down the attackers. Special forces and police officers are now searching the Riyasi area, deploying drones to scan the forested area from above.
इस पूरे ऑपरेशन के लिए ड्रोन्स जो हैं वो लगाए गए हैं। साथ ही साथ हमने 5 टीम्स बनाई हैं जो कि जितने भी एडजॉइनिंग फॉरेस्टेड एरिया हैं उनको कोम करते हुए अलॉन्ग विद द वीडीजी मेंबर्स जो हमारे हैं उनके साथ हम लोग कोमिंग ऑपरेशन करते हुए यहाँ यहीं पे आके सारे के सारे कंक्लूड करेंगे। देयर वाज नो स्पेसिफिक इनपुट रिगार्डिंग दिस साइट। हम जर्नली हमने हाई अलर्ट रखा हुआ था। बोथ द श्राइन्स वर ऑन हाई अलर्ट। वहाँ की सारी नफरी जो है वो भी अलर्ट पे थी। ये आप देख सकते हैं कि ये बिल्कुल साथ में एडजॉइनिंग रजौरी है। दिस एरिया बिलोंग्स टू रजौरी पुलिस। ये नीचे वाला जो पार्ट है ये रियासी को बिलोंग करता है। ये सड़क जो है वो रियासी को बिलोंग करती है। सो उस तरीके से कहा जाए कि बिल्कुल बॉर्डर पे उन्होंने आके स्ट्राइक किया है। अब वी आर स्टिल इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग दैट पार्ट कि वो आए कहाँ से थे, उन्होंने रूट कौन सा पकड़ा था।
This attack is similar to a 2017 incident in the region. 7 pilgrims were killed after their bus got caught in a gun battle between police and terrorists. They were returning from the Amarnath pilgrimage. TRF has also been responsible for terror attacks in Rajouri and Poonch over the last month. According to Home Ministry data, 8 civilians have been killed in Jammu and Kashmir in the first 5 months of 2024. While the deaths may have come down, cross-border terrorism continues to bleed Kashmir. And this new attack has raised concerns over the Amarnath pilgrimage. The annual Yatra draws millions of pilgrims every year. This year, it is set to begin from the 29th of June and will go on till the 19th of August. After the attack in Riyasi, security officials are now reviewing security measures for the upcoming pilgrimage to make sure it goes off without any trouble.
Now let's turn to Africa, to West Africa, where a diplomatic row is escalating between the nations of Niger and Benin. The two neighbors have been at odds for weeks over an oil pipeline which promises to bring much-needed funds to Niger. The pipeline ends at a port in Benin called Simi. Oil from Niger will flow into Benin and get loaded into ships from the Simi port. Now, this means Niger is totally dependent on Benin for its oil exports. If Benin decides to shut off the pipeline, Niger cannot do very much about it. This is exactly what happened last month, sparking the latest row. But now it has escalated. Reports say that Benin has arrested 5 people from Niger. They've been accused of entering the port of Simi illegally, using fake documents. Benin says that 2 of these 5 arrested are agents working for the Niger junta, the military junta that has controlled the country since last July. Niger has denied this. Instead, it has accused Benin of kidnapping. Niger says that the 5 people were working for one of its oil companies who were just inspecting oil shipments at the port. Both countries are now trading accusations. But why are they at loggerheads in the first place? Why are there tensions over this oil pipeline? To understand this, we need to look at the events from last year. At last July's coup in Niger, Niger's military deposed the country's president, Mohamed Bazoum, and this sent a shockwave across the region. It was the 6th successful coup in West Africa since 2020. The 6th coup. The democracies in the region were getting worried that they might be next. So they took a tough stance against Niger. Benin wanted to reverse the coup. It supported a military intervention. So obviously Niger responded. It closed its border with Benin to avoid getting invaded. And the border has been closed ever since, which has affected Benin's economy. The coastal nation has always been a conduit for trade, but the trade route has been closed for months. Instead, Niger has chosen to import goods via other countries. Benin wants to undo this, so it has been applying pressure via the oil pipeline. Because while land trade can be rerouted, Niger cannot do much about its oil pipeline. The pipeline connects Niger's oil-rich Agadem region to Semey. And it has the potential to bring millions to the landlocked country. Presently, Niger's oil output is about 20,000 barrels per day. The pipeline could allow it to expand this to 90,000 a day or more. That means Niger has the chance to increase its oil revenue fivefold. It was one of the poorest nations in the world before the coup. After the junta took over, the economy is still recovering. The oil pipeline revenue would help them. But Benin wants something in return. In exchange for allowing the pipeline to run, Benin wants Niger to reopen their shared land border. It wants the land trade between the two countries to resume. Niger still has not allowed this, even though the post-coup hostilities have reduced. And why is that? Because Niger is wary. The junta has not forgotten that Benin wanted to intervene militarily when the coup took place. Niger is still concerned about a possible intervention, which is why it wants to keep the land border shut. And that is the whole dispute. The countries are trying to resolve it, but so far there's been no resolution in sight. Amid these discussions, Benin has arrested 5 people from Niger. This could be the latest pressure tactic, a way to force Niger to open the border, because it seems the oil exports will keep getting affected till that happens. But even if this tactic works, it won't reduce hostilities, and it's not the way back to cordial neighborly relations. Now let's talk about the other big event from yesterday, India versus Pakistan at the Cricket T20 World Cup. It was a group stage match at a questionable venue, a new stadium in Nassau County in New York. Normally, this wouldn't have been an important match, but this is cricket and it's India versus Pakistan. So, of course, there were going to be fireworks. The match was a nail-biter. India were put into bat first and they posted a very modest target, just 119 runs. That's not much when it comes to T20 cricket. The middle order completely collapsed, leaving India staring at defeat. A first T20 World Cup loss to Pakistan since 2021. But then a miracle happened. Pakistan managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, and the crowd went wild. The celebrations and the memes have not stopped since. Here's our report.
India versus Pakistan, probably the greatest rivalry in cricket.
Yeah, I came here to enjoy a great game. You know, this is one of the biggest games in the world, actually. India versus Pakistan, you can't beat this.
So I think this is objectively one of the biggest rivalries, so it means a lot to both countries, and a lot of pride's on the line for this game.
Every time the two nations play, over 1 billion hearts flutter with anxiety. Yesterday, another chapter was added to this legendary rivalry, with the T20 World Cup match in New York. The match started a bit inauspiciously. Rain caused a bit of a delay, but eventually it did begin. And soon, Indian fans found themselves wishing that the rain would return. India were put into bat first, and the openers fell quick. It was up to Rishabh Pant to stabilize the match, which he did, thanks in part to some questionable fielding by Pakistan. Pant scored 42 in 31 balls, a decent contribution, but what followed was a collapse. India were all out in 19 overs, having made just 119 runs. The target was modest, to say the least, so Pakistan seemed set for a victory. Look at this win predictor. It gave India an 8% chance at victory. But, as the poster says, there's always hope. When everything looked bleak for the men in blue, it's as though destiny intervened, in the form of Jasprit Bumrah. Bumrah took 3 wickets, including that of Pakistan's captain, Babar Azam. And all that for just 14 runs. The memes tell you what his spell meant to Indian fans. India managed to restrict Pakistan to just 113, sparking wild celebrations. Well, on the Indian side at least, it was quite another story across the border.
I think it is a shameful loss. Pakistan took a very good start, did some very fine bowling. The target was reasonable. Pakistan could have easily chased it. But as far as the batting goes, the opening combination was good. Although the first wicket fell early, but they had amassed a reasonable score. But our middle-order batsmen tore the match to shreds.
That was a harsh assessment. The player of the match, Jasprit Bumrah, was much kinder. He says the match could have gone either way. The Indian fans may feel he's giving Pakistan too much credit, but in the end, he helped bring about India's victory and brought joy to over 1 billion hearts. India and Pakistan have played 8 matches in T20 World Cups, but the men in green have managed to beat the men in blue only once. And that scoreline didn't change in New York.
For our last story tonight, let me tell you about 2 Japanese words, futari and hitori. Futari means a couple, meanwhile hitori means being alone. In other words, single. And the Japanese government favors one word over the other. Much like a nosy neighbor, it prefers married couples, because in Japan, it is so common to be hitori or single that it is fueling a crisis, especially in Tokyo, which has the worst figures. 32% men over the age of 50 have never been married, along with about 24% of the women. And the young are increasingly following suit, which is not good news for the government in Tokyo. So now they want to rewrite the story by creating more futari couples, or more couples of futari. How will they do that? With a new initiative called Tokyo Futari Story. It's a government-run dating app. It hasn't been launched yet, but it is already creating a lot of buzz, and there are 2 reasons why. First, the app is driven by AI. When users join the app, they can take a quick test, list their values, the desired traits of a future partner, and based on the results, AI will match them with compatible people. So there is more emphasis on personality instead of appearance. And second, this is a dating app by a government, which is both rare and slightly odd. But the expectation is that the app will have better guardrails. The details are not clear yet, but according to reports, the app will have a stringent registration process. Users will have to declare their age, height, relationship status, job, salary, and educational details. Plus, there will be paperwork, like proof of identity and tax certificate. Safe to say, this app has been met with mixed reactions. Some say users will feel safe using a state-backed dating app, because private apps are flooded with fake profiles and bots. But others say, trust governments to drain the fun out of dating.
People who sign up for these apps feel safe knowing that strange people won't be included, as the registration requires a certificate of single status, so there is a sense of security that there will be few people only looking for fun.
I think it's a good initiative. I've used a dating app myself, and there are a lot of people who impersonate others. But I'm a little hesitant to provide all my personal information to Tokyo government, so I want to see how others react and then use it if it's okay.
Private apps are more widely available now, so I think it will take some time for the Tokyo Futari story to become more widespread. I feel private apps are easier to use for now.
That is true. 70% people looking to get married in Japan are not using dating apps. And this number may reduce slightly, but a government matchmaker is far from becoming a hit. Experts claim that excessive documentation could be a barrier, so could be the scrutiny. It may be too soon to tell, but pre-existing examples showcase a trend. In 2021, Iran launched a state-approved Islamic dating app. It failed because the government was tracking users' personal data and pictures. Then last year, a Chinese city launched a matchmaking app, and things got very creepy very quickly. The app keeps records of matched couples. It asks to be updated about their love life, and the state has access to all interactions on the platform. People already have relatives for that. And this is China we're talking about. Now, this is not to say that the Japanese app would also follow suit or would fail, but this is a common fear among users. And there is an additional issue. The motive of the Japanese dating app It can be used to date, but according to officials, it is solely intended for marriage. It is only for users looking for marriage. And the problem is that in Japan, that's not something many people are looking for. For decades now, the island nation has not seen much matrimonial luck. Last year, the number of marriages fell by 30,000, while the number of divorces rose. This is further worsening Japan's population crisis. This month, the government released fresh data. To no one's surprise, fertility rates hit another record low with far-reaching consequences for Japan's economy, workforce and social fabric. So officials have been scrambling to find a solution. They're expanding childcare facilities, offering housing subsidies, paying couples to have children, organizing matchmaking events, offering counsel for potential lovebirds, and now they're using a new tack, a dating app. But experts say this too may fail.
In the end, the main reason for the low number of marriages and birth rates is that people want to raise their children in a good economic environment, and they don't give birth or get married until those conditions are met, so this app doesn't change that main reason.
It is either too expensive or too inconvenient to have children in Japan. A dating app is yet another taxpayer-funded solution that does not address the fundamental problems here. If history, trends and experts are to be believed, many will swipe left on the state-backed AI Cupid. Now, if only AI could play fortune teller for Japan. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Egypt holds a four-wheel drive car race in the snow in a first-of-its-kind event in the region. In Hong Kong, hundreds compete in the annual Dragon Boat Festival. And is it a cat or is it a leopard? This was the debate on the internet after a mysterious animal was spotted at the Rashtrapati Bhavan during Prime Minister Modi's oath-taking ceremony yesterday. The Delhi police have shed light on the mystery, saying it was a house cat. Finally, we're taking you back in history on this day in 1940. Italy entered World War II as one of the Axis powers. Initially, when Hitler attacked Poland, Italy was unprepared for a war. But the collapse of France convinced Italian dictator Mussolini. He soon declared war on France and the UK. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ lỡ những video hấp dẫn.